Now, inside the country, residents who fled Misrata say government's forces are staging a massacre. Gaddafi's fighters have been attacking oil fields in Misla. NATO has taken full control of the international campaign. The US has now pulled out all of its attack planes, but before it did, final strikes were made on Monday in Sirte and the eastern oil port of Brega. Laurence Lee is in the rebel stronghold of Benghazi. Laurence, what does the situation look like from there?
Well, we've talked obviously repeatedly over the last week or so about this ebb and flow somewhere around Brega on the way towards Ajdabiya, around the Gulf of Sirte, and you know, some days the rebels take it, some days Gaddafi's people fight back. It sounds as of right now that the rebels are back on the run again and have come under sustained rocket attack from Gaddafi's forces and are retreating now back somewhere towards Ajdabiya. It's unclear at the moment whether or not this came about because Gaddafi's forces had simply regrouped for a while and tried to catch them on the hop. We went to an interesting briefing this morning. You'll remember, and as you said in your introduction, that there had been attacks by Gaddafi's forces on the oil fields down in the south, and they believed that the oil fields were rocketed with Grad rockets by Gaddafi's forces. Some of the people there said that Gaddafi has people roaming around the south of the country near the border with Chad, and there are repeated allegations and concerns that he may be bringing in mercenaries and potentially weapons from the south. Remember, there's an arms embargo run by NATO out at sea. So if Gaddafi is to get any more weapons in, they would have to come from the south. And I'm saying this hypothetically, but you do wonder whether it may be possible, inside all this conversation about whether or not outside countries want to arm the rebels, whether it may still be conceivable, at least, that Gaddafi is still finding ways to bring in extra weaponry himself.
And if the rebels aren't armed by outside powers, what chances do they have of being able to take this as far as it goes in the absence of an agreement on a ceasefire?
Well, clearly that actually depends entirely on the strength of the air war, which, as you say, is now being conducted by NATO. Here in the square in the centre of Benghazi, we've now had a second demonstration in as many days by people calling for far greater action by NATO than there's been so far. I can't tell you here exactly what the state is of the NATO airstrikes as of today, Tuesday, but they are certainly extremely worried that they say NATO isn't doing anything like enough to protect the oil fields in the south, which feed oil up to the eastern towns. As I've said, they say Gaddafi has people roaming around in the south in pickup trucks, free to do what they want, and they say here too that NATO should be doing far more to protect people in towns like Misrata. It's extremely difficult, obviously, because NATO as a coalition had enormous problems, for example, getting Turkey to agree to NATO taking control, because there are so many worries about civilians being blown up and injured in bombing by NATO, which goes entirely against the thrust of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1973. But it's a very, very difficult situation at the moment, because certainly without NATO doing something more than they seem to be doing at the moment, the rebels are looking like they're back on the run again.
Laurence Lee in Benghazi. Thank you, Laurence.